developer presented and how people interacted with them and the questions that people ask. And then there's a survey, which is also on the website. We do ask all of you, please fill out the survey, but please don't fill out the survey without actually watching the meeting, because there's a lot of stuff going on there that you would miss from just watching, from just reading the materials. Two of the proposals seem really similar if you read it, and then when you get in there and hear them talk, you realize that they're quite different. So, slide, please. So for everybody who wasn't there, just to kind of recap, also, when you go to fill out the survey, the printed material, all of the printed materials that the city's offering are in this order. The second and third proposals here are actually flipped in the video presentation. So be sure that when you go to fill out your survey that you are careful about which is which, because again, they're very different. So the first proposal, which is the one that the council feels is the most in line with our neighborhood plan, presents a significant amount of housing. It's a mixed use proposal with housing and office space that would be for entrepreneurial spaces, small businesses. It incorporates a green roof that would be public green space. It's not going to be 100% open all the time because people do live there. So there'll be some controls on access to that rooftop, but it will be additional green space in the neighborhood. Each of these buildings also includes the streets and sanitation building next door. And so in this proposal, the streets and sanitation building would be turned into a grocery store or other retail. They said that they are in initial negotiations with a potential vendor. They're not telling us who that is because it's too early. But that also would give us some room to negotiate for what we might want there. And I want to emphasize that point too, as this goes forward. So right now the city's taking public comment. They said they would continue to take public comment for at least 2 weeks after they got all of our questions answered. So that was yesterday. And they will then decide which of these groups they're going to enter into negotiations with. So I want to point out that this is not the only public comment opportunity, and this is not the end of the road either. There will be negotiations for things that the community wants to see in any of these proposals. So also when you submit your survey, if you flag things that you're like, hey, I really want to know more about how much is rent going to be in this building, or what are you going to do about parking, or how will you consider ETOD principles or complete streets or any of that thing, but there will be opportunities for that starting with the survey. Okay, so that's the first one, mixed use, residential and small business, and potentially a grocery store. The other two proposals revolve around the film industry. So I'm going to talk about them in the order that they were presented in the video, because that's what you'll see. So Quartermaster Studios, which is the second one, the third one in this image, is being proposed by Joey Cacciatore and his team that did the Lacuna Lofts in Pilsen. They're producing to have a variety of Chicago Media Angels, which is one group that hires a lot of different people who would contract for the film industry, and then also some additional space for smaller vendors to the film industry. This is the proposal that demolishes the most. I'm sorry, no, I'm mixing that up. Forgive me. This is the middle one where they actually leave the floor plates intact. But they would turn the interior into working space, and then of the main building into working space, and then demolish the streets and sanitation building to put up sound stages. Each of the two film proposals is really pitching the jobs angle, and some of those would be direct jobs that might be measurable. Some of them, they're saying it's going to be, who they would hire for catering and this and that. So that's a little less certain. The third one, which is the one in the middle in front of you, Pershing Sound Studios, is actually CineSpace or Cinelease. They operate under both those names, depending on what that particular facility does. They're They're a national company that's bought quite a lot of property on the south side of the city. They own the lot on Western Avenue where you can, and the film studios on the west side of Western Avenue. So if you've ever driven by there, like between Ogden and 16th, and you see that whole stretch that's dedicated film industry, that's theirs. They have said that what they would build here would be a little friendlier to the neighborhood. For example, that they wouldn't have the big locked gate, but they would, of course, need to have security. They've also said that, excuse me, they've also said that they would offer some form of job training and apprenticeships to help young people enter the film industry. So there's certainly a compelling jobs argument there. Some of the things to consider there, though, are that they are in the business of leasing movie equipment, not just actually running sound stages. This is the proposal that demolishes the most. They would tear down the interior and 2 walls of the existing red brick building and the entirety of the Streets and Sand building, and then rebuild that both of those components for sound stages. They will also, this is also the only proposal that adds parking spaces. They would add 100 parking spaces, some of which are earmarked for large vehicles like big trucks. So there's concerns about ETOD and walkability that comes with that one. Questions on any of this from anybody who missed the meeting, had questions after the meeting? And then I also want to invite Anthony, would you unmute Rick, who might be able to help answer some of these too, if people have questions. Please raise your hand or drop your question in the chat. No takers. Wow. Okay.
But folks, please feel free to use the chat function too if you think about something that comes up during the meeting. You know, and we'll try to address as many of those as possible in this meeting or otherwise. And then, you know, utilize that raise your hand function. I'll be able to unmute you if you want to, you know, ask your question on air.
CBA, excellent question. So none of them have it baked into the proposal. However, the second film studio solution, the one that's the national company, so Pershing Sound Studios, as it's listed here, did point out that a lot of these were going to be union jobs. There was a discussion of CBAs. You can read more about the official answer that they gave the planning department on the website, but it does seem like at least 2 of the 3 developers would be open to that. And frankly, no one is going to say no in public if we're really honest about it. Other questions? Okay. Well, we'll move on for now. Like I said, feel free to ask questions of us, ask questions of DPD too through their form. And if you do guys think of anything later, like feel free to email us. We're here for you. So now we're going to talk about bicycles, starting with the Southwest Side Neighborhood Bike Network, which is a project that's being organized by CDOT and some other organizations. And Tony is working on that.
Hi. We don't have a lot of an update yet, as the task forces that are being assembled to work on this project are still forming, but it's at least progress that it is coming together. Yeah, so as Kate mentioned, last year CDOT got this thing started in South Lawndale with working bikes, and they plan to expand that this year to McKinley Park, Gage Park, and Brighton Park. The idea is to just find short and long-term initiatives to promote cycling in the community. We're calling it a neighborhood bike network. So the task force is forming now. I'm a representative for MPDC, so the representative for McKinley Park on this task force. And we will be meeting sometime at the end of this month or in the first week of April for that initial meeting. So the idea is to find places for bicycle infrastructure and also opportunities to educate people on, how to ride a bike, whatever they need to do to get on two wheels. And also to help make the connection between biking and the quality of life issues, including public health and the benefits to local businesses, which are sometimes not obvious, especially to those local business owners who worry about parking and stuff. And just to that illustration shown on the slide there, the pink area is approximately the area of concern there. I like to call it the aching void of bike infrastructure. And if you look at the north side and compare it to the south side, but especially our corner of the south side, it's just really needs bike infrastructure. So I'm really looking forward to updating everyone with more concrete news next time.
I appreciate your choice of words there, Tony.
And I probably won't have any answers, but if anyone has questions, of course, fire away.
I have one. So like the general idea here, I'm assuming you guys are going to start by identifying some pain points where people are like, why don't we have a bike lane here?
Yes. Well, yeah, but I think the initial thrust is like within neighborhoods, and then the secondary thrust is connecting the neighborhoods, which isn't not my ideal approach, but that's how they're doing it. Definitely looking for input from residents though, and people who either work or live or do commerce in the neighborhood.
All right. And so that's a really great segue into the next thing that we're going to talk about, which is also bike related. Oh, interesting. Okay. Actually, I'm
one
going
of
to
the
let Tony take those
best
questions.
Well, and I'll just answer this is Anthony. I'll just answer the first questions. One of the best locations in the city, gems of a bike shop, is Working Bikes on Western Avenue. Not only do they do training and kind of internship type work, they're actually hiring right now. Full-time positions in their warehouse. They have for many years have kind of rescued bikes from laying in streams or kind of like rotting on the side of the road, getting bikes out of areas of infrastructure where they're kind of thrown away as trash. They repair them, fix them up. They sell bikes very affordably to folks in the neighborhood. You could rent tools from them. You can go and bring your bike in there and do some minor repairs to your own bike utilizing their tools, etc. You can buy parts for your stuff, and that's at what is it? It's just north of Blue Island, on Western Avenue. I know that there's a shop on Archer near us, across from the Dunkin' Donuts. Haven't been in there before, but then Blue City Cycles in Bridgeport, across the street from the police station there on Halsted, is another great local bike shop.
I would also give a shout out to Herbs on 18th and Racine, who are very reasonable, very affordable, and friendly, and no frills. It would be great to have something closer in our neighborhood, and maybe that should be one of the points of discussion as that project moves forward. Yeah. So the other question here about pitch the idea of a bike path down Western Boulevard. That's a great question that probably ought to be revived. Let's make sure we write that one down. Because the next thing we're going to talk about is actually direct involvement in bicycle infrastructure, all in this case, not just bicycle infrastructure. And I'm going to let Mike tell you guys about the Great Rivers Grant. This is a grant from Chicago Community Trust to fund, they will not fund infrastructure, but they will fund things that lead to infrastructure. And so we just put in the application last Friday, and we understand there's not that many finalists, and we are very hopeful that we will have the opportunity to make this happen and get cyclists off of Archer, among other things. So Mike, please.
Yeah, they were weirdly particular about this not being for any physical things and just for planning physical things, or I guess painting physical things potentially. But so the broad overview of what we've been working on, and it's we put a lot of work into this grant application. So we teamed up with Bridgeport Alliance to do some kind of like high level long-term visioning for what a bike path along kind of the entirety of the north side of our neighborhood and the entirety of the north side of Bridgeport would look like. You know, things like what kind of route might it take, what kind of amenities might be there in addition to kind of the standard issue bike path pedestrian stuff that's kind of law at this point in for new construction along the riverfront. And then it would also look at how do we get each of our neighborhoods more connected to the rivers that run, you know, on the north side of them, and you know, all of the fun things that go into that as well as you know, connection to transit and everything. So yeah, it's going to be, this is kind of the first stage of a process that will have many stages that will hopefully eventually trickle down to CDOT, and then they will do their thing, and then there's a lot of like private landowners involved in it, so it's just kind of a we're just going to start dreaming here and then see what comes of it. Anything else, Kate, that I missed?
Yeah, just to fill it in a little bit more. So the idea here is that this would be not all new, because right now, anybody who builds on the riverfront since the river design guidelines were implemented, so let's say at least the last 20 years, probably longer, has to build a pedestrian path, and that's how it's put in the original guideline, along the riverfront. So we actually have a bunch of isolated stretches of concrete along the riverfront. And so part of the idea is we're not entirely reinventing the wheel here. We're actually trying to connect some things that are already there. And so the idea is to connect these properties to each other and also to help people get downtown. So our study area, when Chicago Community Trust set up the grant, these dots here are sites they picked. I think it was close to 80 sites, and said, we want to see development around these sites. What do you have that would improve public health, transportation, access for communities, color that will connect people to the river, a lot of things, a lot of social initiatives. So our proposed path would go from Daily Boat Launch, which is on Western, all the way to Ping Tom Park and Chinatown. And it would add to that. Part of this idea started with the Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community came to us and said, we're thinking of doing something around Ping Tom. Do you want to join us? And then they ended up choosing to work on a different project for this grant. So anyway, our goal here would be basically to connect all of the orange dots on the south bank of the river that are pictured here with infrastructure meant for bicycles and pedestrians. And so some impacts of that would be better connections to the L and getting cyclists off of Archer. At this point, it's an application. We would really like to be able to do this. And they said sometime in April or May, we'll hear more. Questions on this one? Okay. I want to offer a huge thank you for Mike, who has been up a lot of nights working on this. It was a really big project to get that grant in, and it's going to make a world of difference if we actually get it. So very excited. One other side note before we move on from that project too, I want to point out that this proposed route would include the Damon silos, and that's going to be and we did have a site walk and go out and look at it, and we actually have an opportunity there, because no matter what happens with them with that property next, if they build anything on it, they have to also include this pedestrian and cycling infrastructure. So we actually have an opportunity there to get something we want, despite everything that's happened previously with that property. All right, Zach, as you guys know, we've had 3 pending cannabis proposals for the neighborhood, and Zach is going to talk about those a little bit.
We've talked a little bit about the dispensary before. There's been a couple meetings, including a public meeting about the one on the corner there on Ashland and 35th. If you have any more questions about that, I think that we've gone through that quite a bit. The one for the infusion, which is over on 37th Street. This is essentially, if you all are familiar with Mars Brewing, they do some CBD infused seltzers already, and it seems that this is a business-to-business opportunity for an infusion facility that will be working with Mars to create beverages. So that meeting was last week. One of the things that we were I'm reading the comments now. So, one of the things that we were thinking about was, because there's been quite a bit of what just happened? I don't know what just happened.
I think we've either been Zoom bombed, which is possible.
Yeah, had to just suspend activities. So
Okay, that's
Okay.
fine. Do what you need to do, and we will resume.
Okay. Well, so the thing that we were thinking about was after the lively discussion about the dispensary, we were thinking it might be a good thing to invite a speaker to talk about kind of that can speak to a lot of the questions and concerns of the community around the growing cannabis facilities within the neighborhood, and whether or not people were interested in that. There are a lot of hands going on here. Are we going to put the slides back on?
All right. For now, yeah, we did want to, like I said, Zach was saying, we're talking about maybe having a speaker, and also maybe to talk a little bit more about what happens next with these proposals. So each of these, we haven't heard anything from the grow facility yet, and it's in Bridgeport. It's not going to be part of the Development Council's purview, but of course, it seems if something people want to know about it, we'll pass along the information. Or for any of you who subscribe to the 11th Ward newsletter, they're including their information about these proposals as things evolve. So anyway, one of the things we talked about, the zoning board has 5 criteria. They're pretty straightforward, and it kind of, the way the form almost looks like the form kind of looks like grade school homework, if I'm really honest, where it's like, how will you meet this first criteria? A couple of blank lines. How will you meet the second criteria? A couple of blank lines. So anyway, would people be interested in having a speaker on some of this, just to understand better, what to expect, and also the experiences of other neighborhoods who have had these facilities move in? Anybody?
Seems like there's a lot less discussion without Zoom bombing.
Yeah. Feel free to drop your comments in the chat. This is the downside, I have to say, the downside of doing it online, and I should have said something about the beginning. Because last week CDOT scheduled at the exact same time that we were supposed to have our regular meeting, we rescheduled to facilitate what they were doing, to talk about bicycle infrastructure. But on the other hand, in doing so, we lost our venue. And so we are online tonight. We will be back in person next month. Okay, well, onward and upward. UIC is coming back. So I think most of you will remember last year where we had about 15 UIC urban planning students running around the neighborhood and setting up really fun things to play with in the park and the play garden at Mariposa and over at Aquinas for some community meetings to talk about transportation and housing and what do we want our neighborhood to look like. So they're coming back. Same time frame. It'll be another summer term class in May. And this year we're going to focus on revitalizing 35th Street. So some activities, that's going to mean both policy issues and design issues, and policy issues, design issues, and actually looking at the buildings. Because one of the things, for example, we have anecdotal evidence that part of the reason we're having trouble holding on to restaurants in the neighborhood is because of what terrible shape some of these buildings are in on the inside, and things like the guy who owned Quesabaria Jalisco was having to pay utilities for all 3 floors of that building because they were connected, even though the upper 2 floors were uninhabitable. And so obviously that's an issue to a small, even a large business owner. So we're going to be looking at things like that and coming up with some recommendations for what can we do to make these storefronts functional again, and how can we help small business owners get into them. We'll also be looking at the zoning situation, because most of 35th Street has been downzoned to residential, which of course makes it really difficult to put a business into a vacant storefront. And talking to business owners about what they want to see, and some streetscaping as well, talking about what residents want to see. We are going to need some volunteers to help with these activities. By our next meeting, we hope to have some better defined tasks for what volunteers can do. But right now, we're certainly going to want need some help from those of you who are bilingual to help with interpretation, to make sure that everyone can participate. We're also going to need some help hanging out flyers so that everybody knows that this is going on, and probably also with some basic like setting up event stuff, like setting up food and physical items for activities. So any of you who are interested in getting involved with that project, I think it's going to be, we've talked about 35th Street for so long, and here's your opportunity to really get involved. We do anticipate that we'll have some results that can be acted on pretty quickly, and others that may take longer. But yeah, please use the chat, raise your hand, ask to come off mute. We do want to hear from you guys. All right, next slide. So Preservation Chicago, I think quite a few of you have met Ward, who occasionally comes to this meeting. I think the last time he was with us was when we had a guest speaker about workers' cottages. So anyway, Ward is the president of Preservation Chicago. They recently published their 7 most endangered list, and industrial buildings writ large, industrial buildings on the southwest side was one of the 7 items that they listed, and that includes 2 buildings in our neighborhood, the Continental Can Company, which is projected to be demolished for the new Karis cold storage facility, and the Damon Silos, which we have, there's been no permit for demolition issued yet, but there is motion towards making that happen. If you go out there right now, there is in fact a wrecking ball parked on the property. So we appreciate Preservation Chicago drawing attention to this issue, and we encourage you to check out the rest of the article. It was pretty well covered on their website, also by Black Club and several other organizations. And that brings us to our guest speaker, who is actually from Preservation, Illinois. Kendra, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you this evening to share some information about Landmarks, Illinois and historic preservation in Chicago. I'm not sure if it's still possible to share my slides, or I can go ahead and share them if that works better at this point.
Anthony?
Thank you, Anthony. So my name is Kendra Parzan. I'm the Chicago Area Advocacy Manager for Landmarks, Illinois. I work with communities across Chicagoland to connect them to historic preservation resources and support advocacy for historic places. And I've been with Landmarks, Illinois since last year. Some of you may have met my predecessor, Lisa DeCura, who I gather was basically all over the city. But before we start, I also want to note that I've included links for the presentation, and obviously you can't click on those right now, but I just sent this presentation to Kate, so hopefully if there are any links that anyone would like to further investigate, hopefully Kate, you can share that and follow them for more information.
Absolutely.
Anyone as unfamiliar, what is historic preservation? Historic preservation is honoring our shared past by preserving its physical reminders, using places to tell the stories of people's experiences, both individually and as communities, and reusing existing buildings rather than demolishing and building new. And pictured as our young professionals group. I'm sorry, I understand I'm having some audio problems. Hang on a second, let me plug in my headset.
Yeah, no problem. It sounds like you're just a bit garbled. Maybe double check that you're connected to your laptop microphone or something like that. But we can work around it if you're not able to.
I have this
While she's getting set up, one of the things I want to point, part of the reason we've invited Kendra tonight is because it's a requirement for the sale of the buildings on Pershing that the new owners seek landmark status. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what that means. And it's a topic that has come up again and again as we talk about reusing some of these older industrial buildings in the neighborhood.
Is that better?
Much better. Thank you so much.
Excellent. We can go on to the next slide. So I'd also like to acknowledge that historic preservation has kind of an image problem, I would say. And, I think that a lot of people hear historic preservation and they think that we're just going around like making people who have where Abraham Lincoln slept never change them. That is not what Landmarks, Illinois is about. I think that that's not what most historic preservationists are about these days. We have a few left. So why does historic preservation benefit to McKinley Park or to historic neighborhoods anywhere in the city? Historic buildings and neighborhoods are statistically home to more small businesses. They have human scale density. They're typically more walkable and bikeable than new neighborhoods. Building reuse is much better for the environment than demolishing and building new. We have a lot of embodied energy in our historic buildings that we can hold on to if we reuse them. Rehabilitation can generate a lot of jobs, and pictured is a craftsperson working on the rehabilitation of the old Cook County Hospital, which was rehabilitated into a hotel and food hall and office space after over 20 years of advocacy trying to stop that building from being demolished. It's also been found that historic residential buildings typically have more affordable housing than new construction. New construction is extremely expensive these days. So it's often easier to put new affordable housing into historic buildings. Plus, older buildings often house our more affordable housing than new construction just naturally. And then lastly, historic districts tend to have higher property values. That one's a little iffy these days with the state of our property taxes, but I want to be transparent about that anyway. So that can be a good thing and a bad thing. Next slide, please. What is Landmarks, Illinois? We are, so for those of you who know Ward and Preservation Chicago, we are the statewide counterpart of Preservation Chicago. We're a statewide nonprofit organization promoting preservation and reuse of historic buildings. We were founded in Chicago in 1971. We're still based here, even though we do operate across the state. And our goal is to freely share resources and expertise related to historic preservation with anybody who is interested. And our motto, our tagline is saving places for people. So also working very hard to make sure that preservation is not just about buildings, but also about the communities and people that use them and love them. Next slide. What are some of the resources that Landmarks Illinois can offer to share with folks? One of our main functions is advocacy. So I'm the Chicago area advocacy manager. I'm out and about basically telling people not to demolish historic buildings across Chicagoland. But more importantly, we want to help people, local advocates amplify the message that they would like to see a historic building saved and reused. Part of that is that we run an annual list like Preservation Chicago does, but statewide, of the most endangered historic places in Illinois. And that draws attention to places under threat. And pictured here are some advocates at Alkeld Gardens School Building C, which was on our list in 2021. We stay very involved with our most endangered places. And last month, I think it was last month, we were able to arrange a pro bono assessment of the building by McGuire Gillespie Architects. We also have grant programs. Sorry, not quite yet. Oh. We also have, thank you. We also have 3 grant programs that Chicago Historic Places are eligible to apply for. They're available to nonprofit or governmental organizations. They go up to $5,000. So they're small grants, but they're meant to help get projects started. We have a reinvestment program, which provides loans up to $150,000 for pre-development, construction, or operational costs for projects in historic buildings. So that's open to nonprofits or for-profit corporations. And it's a revolving fund. So once the money gets paid back, it goes out the door again to support another project. And then we also manage the Illinois Restoration Resource Directory on our website. So if you have a project and you need expertise related to a historic building, we have a bunch of contractors that we connect you with who have that specific expertise. Next slide, thank you. What work has Landmarks Illinois done locally? We, a few years ago, were very active in promoting the preservation of the CMD. In 2014, that was on our most endangered list. And then we worked very closely with Erica Ruggiero, who was our volunteer, to nominate the 2 National Register districts, Pershing Road and Original East. That was partially, to enable the possibility that people could reuse historic preservation tax credits to rehabilitate those buildings. And I'll talk more about tax credits in a little bit. Another more recent project that we've been working on, not in McKinley Park, but nearby, last year we were able to arrange a pro bono engineering assessment for the Little Village Arch, and then also worked with the Little Village Community Council to help them navigate with CDOT and DPD about the future of the arch. So that's what Landmarks Illinois does, but let's talk a little bit now about what are landmarks and how to use them as an advocacy tool. So landmark, obviously, can be a formal or a more colloquial term. Informally, a landmark is just a physical building or a landscape or an object that holds significance for a community. A landmark can also be a group of these types of places, which is what we refer to as a district. But formally, there are also official local or national landmarks. So the city of Chicago designates landmarks using a citywide ordinance. They're proposed by preservation staff or by the public, and they're approved by the Commission on Chicago Landmarks and by City Council. And then at the national level, there's also the National Register of Historic Places and the National Historic Landmark Program. The National Register is a list of historic places across the country. It's maintained by the Department of the Interior. And in Illinois, National Register sites are approved by a state level board before going to the Department of the Interior for final approval. And I'll talk a little bit more in the next slides about what each of these things mean. So this distinction between what a local landmark does and what a National Register listing does, I think, is one of the most confusing things in historic preservation. And we are a field with a lot of technical jargon things. So that's really saying something. But what's the difference between a local landmark in the National Register, the difference is in the level of protection they offer, as well as the incentives that are available to encourage preservation. So at the city level, a city landmark designation offers protection against demolition or major changes. Either of those things would have to be approved by the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, which is an appointed review board specifically for historic preservation in the city. So if you're looking to protect a historic place, local landmark designation is by far the best tool that is available to do that. Being a city landmark or part of a city historic district also makes a building or place eligible to receive funds through the city's Adopt a Landmark grant program, which offers funds for restoring and repairing historic buildings. If anybody's interested in learning more about that program, actually DPD, that grant period is open for this year right now, and DPD is having a webinar on March 29th. It also makes a building eligible for the county Class L property tax incentive, which reduces the property tax rate for 12 years if you rehabilitate a landmark building for commercial and industrial use, and spend at least 50% of the market value on the rehabilitation. And then also, Chicago landmarks are eligible to have their permit fees waived for anything that requires a permit project. I will say the caveat there is that waiver has to be approved by city council. So it's only good if you know pretty far in advance that you're going to need a permit and have that permit waived, to have that permit fee waived. So how can you nominate a Chicago landmark? The Commission on Chicago Landmarks can usually direct city staff to prepare a nomination for a landmark. A lot of these directives come internally, but there is also opportunity for the public to put forward suggestions for their consideration. That opportunity comes twice a year through the program committee accepts suggestions. So basically, in order to get ready to do this, you need to research the history of your property, ask for owner consent. To list a local landmark, you don't have to have owner consent. It's much easier if you do. Landmarks can be listed without owner consent, but it has to go through a hearing process. It's much more likely to find success if you can get the owner on board. And then you would submit what's a public suggestion form, basically, which includes a little bit of history about the place. Give that to submit that to the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, and they will review it at the program committee that meets in January and September, typically. Another important piece of this program is to have aldermanic support. Everything goes much easier if your alderman is willing to submit a letter of support to go along with, or to the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, either with a public suggestion form, or just if something has come up for landmarking through the suggestion of the commission. If the need for landmark status is urgent and you can't necessarily wait for the program committee to meet, or like, for example, you're worried that occur in the next few months. You can also write to the Commission on Chicago Landmarks and ask them to consider a landmark outside of this cycle. They do sometimes do that. They can choose whether or not to put things on their agenda for landmarking. The more people that you have in support of that, the more likely they are to direct staff to put it on the agenda. So again, they don't have to take those suggestions. It doesn't always work, but if you are in a bind, it's definitely worth a shot. Next slide, please. So now let's talk about the other kind of landmarking, which is the National Register. So National Register designation is largely honorific. It doesn't prevent the average property owner from doing whatever they want with their property. What it does do is it offers some protection if the property either belongs to the federal or state government or will be affected by a federal or state government action or funding. In that case, it may trigger one of several types of review that offer opportunities to consider alternatives. Technically, a property doesn't actually have to be listed on the National Register to receive this protection. It only has to be considered eligible, so it doesn't have to actually go through the entire process to trigger this, which is not widely known. But the most relevant, there are several review processes that this can trigger. It depends on like what federal departments are involved, et cetera. The most relevant one to know for the general public is the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. And although you might think from the name that NEPA only applies to the natural environment, the environment that it refers to also includes the human environment, including historic resources. So the reason that I say NEPA is perhaps most relevant for the general public is because it allows the public to comment directly to federal agencies about actions that might affect historic places. Some of these other review processes, these are limited to what are called consulting parties, which are typically organizations, not individuals. But notice of opportunities to comment are usually published in the Federal Register, which is the federal government's daily bulletin that's available online. Sometimes, though, agencies, not to attract too much attention, don't do that. So that's something to watch out for. They may only publicize NEPA comment up periods and opportunities to a smaller group, which they really shouldn't be doing, but sometimes they do. Sorry, not quite yet. Thanks. The National Register also offers important incentives for preservation. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, there are federal and state historic preservation tax credits. They offer either 20 or 25% respectively in credits for qualifying expenditures to rehabilitate a historic building. The state historic preservation tax credit is actually being considered for extension in the current legislative cycle. So we're hoping it's going to be renewed. We don't know yet, but the federal credit will remain available. And then also in Illinois, if you have a residential building of up to 6 units, you can get the property assessment freeze for historic residences, which freezes the assessed value over a 12-year period if you spend at least 25% of the market value on rehabilitation. And that can be anywhere from single family up to 6 units. Next slide. Thanks. So how can you nominate something to the National Register? Again, this starts with doing some research about the history of the property and trying to get owner consent. Unlike local designation, National Register nominations have to have owner consent or they will not go forward. We just saw this with the Thompson Center, which was nominated to the National Register. It was found to be eligible, but the state review board did not forward it to the federal government because the owner did not consent, which was a big bummer after all the advocacy and hard work that went into that nomination. Regardless of your personal feelings about the architecture of the Thompson Center, which I know is controversial, it is very significant from a design perspective. So you then would reach out to the Illinois State Historic Preservation Office. They would ask you to do what's called a preliminary evaluation form. And that's just a chance for you to avoid having to do all of the research that goes into a full form without knowing whether or not they're likely to move forward with the nomination. So they send you back, hopefully, an approval to go ahead and do the full nomination. You do a full nomination form and supporting materials, which usually includes photography and some maps. And then if all goes well, you get the chance to present a nomination to the Illinois State Historic Sites Advisory Council, which meets 3 times per year. And then if they approve it, it goes on to the federal government for approval.
Kendra, can I ask a question there?
Yeah.
So some of the things you just talked about, one of the things that we want to see in the neighborhood in the next few years, well, first off, one of the things we expect to see is continued rehabilitations of some of our older homes. Hopefully we would like to see that more of them are owner occupants, rather than corporate buyers. Right. So, what counts? I mean, a lot of the homes in our neighborhood were built before 1900. Workers' cottages are not fancy. You would not typically think of them as historic monuments, but like what counts? Can the average homeowner who buys a workers' cottage 2 flat use these tax incentives to freeze their property taxes if they do the work?
Yeah, they can. And some of that, so actually when you say a workers' cottage is like not fancy and historic, I'm like, oh no, workers' cottages are at so much risk and being demolished so often. Like workers' cottages are so eligible. And so historic, they really represent a key period in Chicago's evolution and in history. And yes, I think that they would definitely be considered historic enough. The question is then, do they have one of these local, because they do have to have either the local or National Register designation or be part of a historic district that has that in order to take advantage of these incentives. So I think that's the area where the answer might be, is that in place or not? And of course, so one great way to enable more people to take advantage of these incentives is to advocate for either a local or national historic district. If that's of interest to the community, you do then have to get the consent of like the majority of property owners within a historic district to go ahead with that designation. So, that's a question. People have different thoughts, opinions about historic districts. They have different priorities when it comes to their homes. And, I understand that. But if these incentives are of interest to the community, then that would be the way to make that possible.
Okay. And for a larger, sorry, we have a question in the chat. Let's take that one first. What reasons would the owner of a building have to not give consents for a landmark nomination? Are there usage, development, or renovation limitations once it's a landmark?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer to that is yes. If it's a local landmark, then there are restrictions on development, not usage, but development and renovation limitations. So the downside is that, as I talked about, so the Commission on Chicago Landmarks reviews changes, if it's a smaller change, sometimes just preservation staff at the city reviews changes to buildings that are either individually landmarked or part of a landmark district. And so that adds another layer of review to city review processes that can already be kind of long and complicated. There are, they will limit what changes you make on the exterior. So sometimes, that may mean not being able to put a really large addition on that's really visible from the street, or sometimes they regulate materials. And so I think especially with smaller homes, sometimes there can be a question of like, well, if they're going to require me to use like materials that are specific or like appropriate for the time period that the house was built, are those materials going to be more expensive than what I might be able to use without any oversight? And sometimes the answer to that question is yes, sometimes no, it's about the same. It's hard to say, but that's a consideration for sure. So I think that's a drawback for a community that becomes a historic district, is that sometimes, the incentives also come along with restrictions for anybody whose home or building is within that historic district. And so that's the big drawback, is that there's that extra layer of oversight.
There is a quick question to clarify something that's on our Facebook page. How do you know if one's residential property is architecturally significant to merit nomination? What are the criteria that really are there, blankets to assume? Yeah.
Yeah. So there is, if you're talking about Chicago landmark designation, let me see if I can quickly pull up. There's a list of criteria, and I'm going to put a link to this in the chat for everybody's reference. So in Chicago, to become a designated landmark, sorry, that was a direct, well, I think I can only do direct, or can I do, oh no, I can do everyone. Here we go. So there's a link to the landmark designation criteria, and I will note, so you have to meet at least 2 of these, and that can be a little bit of a high bar for an individual house. It's less of a high bar if you can get the critical mass together to do a historic district, because a group of places is more likely to be able to meet 2 of these criteria than an individual house. So these are I won't read through them, but there are 7 criteria. You need to meet at least 2.
So, and that's for the city, correct?
That's for the city, yeah. The National Register has a different list of criteria that are pretty similar, but it's a similar concept. Right? That you actually only need to meet 1. But again, it's an easier bar for the average house. It's an easier bar to clear as a district than an individual property owner.
And so let's just say hypothetically, because like we haven't done any homework on this or anything, but let's say that hypothetically, one of the things that's happening in our neighborhood, we're starting to see more more corporate ownership, starting to come in and buy the 2 and the 3 flats. And when that happened in Pilsen, you saw a lot of times where the 3rd or even the 4th generation of the family like sold and moved away. And that's something that we would obviously not like to see happen here. We'd love to see more owner occupants. And so I guess for the average person, let's say we had a hypothetical, central manufacturing historic district for all of our workers' cottages that were built for the people who originally worked there. If we did that at the national level, how restrictive would that be for the average homeowner, or is it you?
If it's a national register district, it's not restrictive for the average homeowner at all. It's really honorific.
Okay.
And I will say that there are many neighborhoods in Chicago where we just have a national register district and not a local district, because that does give you access to some incentives without the layer of restriction. So we prefer to have local and national register go together, just because we like that layer of protection against demolition. But you don't have to do it that way.
Sure. I'm just thinking about, also helping like some of our older folks stay in their homes as things change around them.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. We can go to the next slide. I mean, I think that was all I had. So this is my contact information. If anybody wants to talk more about historic preservation, has concerns at any places in your neighborhood or other neighborhoods in Chicago or anywhere in the state, reach out to me. We are here to help and share our expertise with you. So I'm also happy to take any more questions before I head out.
Anybody? We'll make these materials available. Kendra, it would be okay if we posted this on our website, or posted some basics on social media, maybe not your contact information.
Yeah, that would be, I guess, my contact information is available on our website, so that's fine too. All of that stuff is out there in the public already, so go for it.
All right. Thank you so much. This is really interesting and kind of a hot topic, as we're looking at what's going on with Pershing, and also what will become of some properties that are going to have been or will be soon potentially sold on the riverfront. So really appreciate your time.
I'm very, very glad to have been able to do this. So thanks for the opportunity.
All right. And with that, we are at time. So I want to wrap up by reminding you to go vote. Early voting is underway. Absentee ballots are available now. If you live in the 11th ward, early voting is at McGuane Park. If you live in the 12th ward, early voting is in the library. And I see we have a question from Billy.
Yes.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Can you see me?
No, but that's okay.
Okay, let me turn my camera on. Sorry about that. I don't think I can turn it on here, but anyway, no, this is Billy Drew. I'm from the neighborhood, born and raised in McKinley Park. I'm a part of the 12th Ward Independent Political Organization. Thank you for reminding everybody to vote, by the way, Kate. Early voting is at McKinley Park Library. Pretty consequential election. So I know you all know this. The city can go in 2 different directions. We're talking about development, and there's a candidate that has a history of closing schools and another candidate that wants to fully fund our schools. So I think that's pretty important. So I won't go further into politics, because I know this isn't really a place to discuss it, but I thought it's just relevant, especially when we talk about aldermanic prerogative and how it relates to development in our ward. We have a new alderwoman, Julia Ramirez, who will be taking office in May. And, she very much campaigned on having a community-driven development process. So really excited about that and how this organization can play a part in it. Appreciate all the work that you all do on the neighborhood. I know I haven't been as involved in this group, but I'm definitely excited to be a part of this group moving forward, just because of the possibilities with this new alderwoman. So, so yeah, with that, I just wanted to say that, and yeah, I'm really excited. And you know what? Another idea that on the topic of preservation too, I think we should also be talking about a great presentation, by the way. Those buildings are beautiful on Pershing. I think, I really don't like the idea of demolishing any of that building, but because of how historic they are and to this neighborhood and what they mean. But yeah, I did CDOT or did DPD say how many responses they got to that survey? Because that would be good. Just
Yeah.
get as much input on that on those proposals as possible. So yeah, I think it's good that if we have an aldermanic prerogative, in this case with the alderwoman that's on our side, we'll have more say as a community as to what happens. But that's my opinion. There's one of the candidates, I think Paul Vallis, wants to take that away and take that power away from the community by taking it away from the alderman. So I don't think that's a good idea. But yeah, I just wanted to give my thoughts and make sure that we preserve the economic and ethnic diversity of our community as well, because I think that's important when we're talking about preservation of buildings. I think that's those other topics are just as important, because they're what makes this neighborhood so beautiful, is the economic and racial diversity, because yeah, it's really important. So I'll stop talking now and let someone else talk. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Billy. Careful what you wish for. If you would like to get involved, we have a couple open spots on the board and we will rope you in. Also, if you would like to, drop us an email, drop us a line, we can set up a time to have coffee and kind of catch you up on some things that have been going on. Also, since we do have a new alderwoman and we don't on the 12th ward, and we don't know what's going to be happening in the 11th ward, I will mention that as the new city council gets seated and everybody gets settled in, it will be one of our priorities to catch up all of the related parties on things that are in motion, so we can enlist the help that we have. And I would add also that for the grant application that we submitted for along the riverfront, we did have the support of all 3 relevant wards. So from Julia on the 11th, from Byron in the 25th, and from Nicole in the 11th. So we are really grateful to have that support. All right. So yes, go vote, please.
I got something, Kate.
Okay.
I don't even know what the rules are. Hey, Billy, you still on this call? Can you hear me? Hello.
So John, people are
participants
unmuted
can't.
from one context.
Yeah.
If you guys want to talk offline,
No, I don't want to talk offline. I'd like to nominate him to get on this council. I'm making that a formal thing. This is an open session now, right at the end. Well,
okay.
talking, right? I'll nominate Billy to be on the council.
All right. Yeah, we'll do our usual process where we invite people to have a sit down and talk about what exactly is involved, and then everybody makes an informed decision. But we'd certainly like to talk to you. All right. So last slide, please. We're just going to remind you about some upcoming events. It has been an absolute fire hose for the last couple of months, and would really like to thank everyone who's come out for all. There have been so many neighborhood events, and we really appreciate all y'all showing up. So upcoming events, the election in 2 weeks. Our next meeting will be in person. We'll be back at Bethany Church. And then in the month of May, we're going to get going with UIC again. So you're going to see probably another, we hear there may be 20 urban planning students running around this year to help us out. There will be some events with them. Like I said, our next 2 public meetings will be in person. We will not have a public meeting in June because we're going to have at least 2 big events with UIC during the course of planning. So kind of like last year where we had one event that was a lot of hands-on things to do and a conversation starter, and then also the final presentation of the students' work. And the work they did last year has been really, really helpful to us. It has helped us lobby the city, for example, UIC's recommendations made it into the requirements for the sale of the buildings on Pershing. And that's a really big deal. So like these things are helping us to get the things that we want in the neighborhood. And that's because of all of you who show up and participate in these events so that we know what the neighborhood wants. And also to make sure that we're connecting with people who don't come to these meetings, regardless of what language they speak or whether they work nights or whatever. We want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to participate. All right, and with that, we call it a night. So thank you, everybody. Please let people know we're here. Please let people know what's going on and send us your questions.